All right, everybody. Welcome to the Kubernetes 1.8 burndown meeting. It is September 25th. That is a Monday, in case you're keeping track. And I am Jay Singer-Dumars, release team leader, and this agenda will be available after the fact at http, bit.ly/Kates18 release. So let's dig into this release meeting now. Let me share my screen. And forgive me if I'm extra punchy today. It's been one of those days, and yeah, I'll try and be in as pleasant a mood as possible. Okay. Let's see. All right. Is that visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so let's run down the timeline for this week. Basically, we need to keep our eyes on the prize. Wednesday release date is still targeted. I keep polling people for their confidence levels on that, and so far I've heard nobody be under 80%. So far that's pretty promising. We need to finalize marketing. There's some work to do on the blog post about this release. We're doing various interviews and trade publications. Need to make sure that we have alignment on talking points, which I put out my personal feeling on those, which is making sure that we're focusing on feature depth over feature breadth, so less focus on base functionality gaps. Extensibility is front and center of this release with CRDs and all the other great work to expand out KubeADM work, etc. SIGs are now more visible as stewards of features and functionality. So hopefully that will lead to more people getting involved as stakeholders in SIGs. And lastly, the release notes are the source of truth on specific implementations. We can talk about various aspects of features and what's being delivered, but it's always best to point people to the release notes and say, hey, read what the SIGs wrote, because better from the horse's mouth. And as the leader of SIG Horse, I feel comfortable saying that. So finalized docs, still working on that. In tech review of those documents, we want to close out all the issues. We want to make sure all the cherry picks that we need to get into the 1.8 release branch are in. We need to ensure testing is green on the blocking tests, and if there are ones that are not green on the non-blocking tests, we need to figure that out as well and decide how much we care about those as a group. Today, I would love to have a brief discussion about what we consider go, no-go criteria. Obviously, a base expectation is that the release master or the branch blocking tests are green, but there may be other things that we consider of import. So I'd love to have a discussion about that. We'll get to that in a moment. Timeline for next week. Let's do the time warp again, which means 1.9 begins in earnest. So we'll see how that goes. Metrics review. We're down to 5 issues in the milestone. That's down 3, looking good. Of those 5, 1 is considered truly release blocking. That is the API latency issue that is being actively looked at by Jordan and Shyam and others. Thank you for doing that. There are some other issues in there as well. One is long-term, which has been lingering. I'm going to pull it out of the milestone today, unless I hear otherwise, because it does not seem to actually be getting any traction or working, and I'll move that to 1.9. If people have any insight in terms of the status on the issues that are not currently marked as release blocking, I would love to have all those closed out by EOD today, if at all humanly possible. I want to have solid signal by the end of the day, so tomorrow we can have a real true discussion on what is blocking us and what isn't. Any questions thus far? Concerns? All right, onward. Open PRs, there's 3. I assume that Adam will be cherry picking like a Eastern Washington farmer, and we will get those taken care of. Submit queue is looking pretty good today. The only one that was failing that I saw was COPS, and hopefully if anybody in this call is able to look at that, that'd be great. Not as big an issue now that we're dealing with a sidelined release branch, but still good to know in case we need to get stuff run through. And dashboards for the various 1.8 things. We've got a lot of red and failing tests there. We'll get into that momentarily. And just FYI, if you want to look at those yourself. SIG breakdown looks exactly as you'd expect. Hopefully we'll get all these down to 0 soon. So what I'd like to do is go through these updates, and instead of going to the announcements open mic, I want to go back to the go, no go discussion. So anybody who's interested in that, let's go back and visit that at the end. So stick around for that if you could. Branch updates. Let's go ahead and have those now from Adam. Take it, Adam.
Okay, so yeah, we're not muted. In terms of the overall branch health, like things build and test locally pretty well. It's looking kind of, as far as I can tell, like a valid chunk of code. And the extent to which I don't think we could actually release it as it is comes down to the same kind of red tests that we've been talking about. I kind of did a skim over the full suite today, this morning, just to kind of see what was happening. Well, it looks like kind of mechanical stuff, more to do with test infra or how we're triggering test infra. And there's a big pervasive issue with DNS. I won't go into the details because I'm probably stealing the thunder of Eric, who's dug into this with a lot more discipline than I have. But yeah, there's some stuff we need to figure out, ideally today. It'd be good to get a green panel. Okay.
Yeah, we got to get all hands on deck on that. That is critical. Thanks for detailing that out there. If you're interested in following along, just skim through those, but we're not going to go through those as a group right now. So build failures, basically, it's all test infra at this point, and we'll get into that.
Maybe a bit harsh.
Is it all? Are there other actual build failures like?
To be honest, I don't think there are build. Well, I don't know. It depends what this missing cube test thing is all about. I don't understand that.
Okay.
I guess I'm being anal and differentiating between a build failure versus a test failure.
Right. No, that's yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and hop into the testing stand-up. Who wants to handle that? Eric, you got that?
Yeah, I can take it. So we're switching over to the release 1.8 locking test instead of master because we cut the branch finally. And the sort of summary is that E2E, we have a few flaking tests that are sort of look like infrastructure issues more than anything. So I will be going and investigating these depending on what they are. So the federation job is failing to come up. The GKE GPU is flaking, and so is one of the kubeADM jobs. The upgrade tests, we have a issue recently that a few tests that were claimed to be fixed actually have not been fixed. So changes got in that claim to sort of fix the issue and they closed them out. But recently, after giving enough time for the test to run again, we've learned that these weren't actually fixed. So this is really messing with our ability to get signal out of these tests because there are sort of known issues and they're just continuing to fail. I will be following up with the owners of the tests and trying to figure out what's release blocking, what can we get green, what can be solved possibly with infra changes. So I think I just need help since I see that you're typing that, just following up on these two issues and trying to figure out what we do in terms of if they're decided to be not release blocking, do we just let them be read or what?
If you do not get traction with somebody, give me their names and I will hunt them down. So
okay, sounds good.
So couple maybe suggestions. So the kubeadmin was mainly failing on the kubeadmin upgrade tab. So I don't think they are evergreen since they set up. We probably want to move them out of the blocking, move them into the upgrade SKU.
Yeah, they also on that note, they also weren't on the master blocking.
Yeah.
So it seems weird that they would suddenly be blocking now that we are out of freeze.
I think when they set up job, they just toss it into the blocking dashboard.
Is there anybody here that can speak to that? Because my inclination is, unless there's a compelling reason, we should just pull it out. There's not. I would love to have somebody speak the alternate point of view. I will try and figure out the alternate point of view. And
I think the alternate point of view might be that kubeadm is really, really waiting for an actual 1.8 release artifact to be cut before it can truly verify that kubeadm works with 1.8 release. But yeah, I would track down Lucas, probably.
Yes.
And so going on, the federation job, that one seems just like failing to come up from the very beginning. I'm not sure if there's any federation folks here.
Yeah, we should cut it.
Yeah. What else we can just, I don't know, maybe just kill the job. Because federation pre-submit is not blocking and not always running anymore.
Do we have a potential tech lead for SIG Federation that we can point this to, or somebody that we know would be a good candidate?
Bell. Christian Bell.
Okay. Wait, can't type my own name today. All right.
Yeah, that one I'll handle it. It's mostly because some GKE, so GKE itself does not whitelist, does not enable the GKE API in G-Cloud anymore. I'll investigate internally, and I'll probably manually enable the API for it.
Okay. All right. So Eric, as it stands, it looks like there's a fair amount for you to do here. What's your confidence level on being able to accomplish this stuff, and do you need more help?
I think that, so I sort of put this in the retro as well that I'd like to talk about, but these tests have been basically read forever. The network partition tests were read when we cut 1.7. And I think that it depends more about how we, what the go, no go on this is. Like, if they have to be green, I don't know, because they haven't been green in a while, so I don't know the effort that it takes to get there.
Okay, let's, we'll hit that in the go, no go. All right, anything else you want to hit before we move on? Okay.
Nothing to me.
Test infra, Sin, is there anything else you need to add?
The biggest thing is we lift the code freeze, and that seems worked pretty well, and we are merging 1.9 PRs. Yeah, that's like the biggest updates.
Okay, great. So I'm not sure if Ihor's on. I can't see everybody here, but if anybody want to speak to features and documentation and marketing.
Ihor is here,
Hey.
and hey Jace. So I don't have any major updates besides that you have highlighted at the beginning of the call. So we're done with the features. Now our main plan is to highlight them in an appropriate way with the outer world. So we currently have several interviews and public interactions scheduled, thanks to CNCF marketing and other parties with different public sources, and we're going to do that in the next few days. So see there 1.8 updates in the public sources, in the public newsletters and so on.
Great, thanks, Ihor. Anybody else want to speak to that stuff? Okay, release notes update. We're starting to actually edit the draft and get that in shape to publish. There's 2 PRs that need to be merged, and there's comments on that, so Radhika's been looking at that. Anything else we want to add for release notes before we go to the go no go discussion?
Just quickly, Radhika and I are still hoping to get a little more content in a few areas where it's not clear what's changed, but obviously this is a nice to have at this point. And we will bring a fair amount of stuff to the retrospective table.
Good. Is there any specific SIGs that you need to get hassled?
No, I'm on it with
Okay.
with SIGApps, and the others we're tracking down.
Great. If that changes, you need my help, please let me know.
Will do. Thanks.
One thing, I apologize for this late. I don't see any known issues. It could be that we're about to cut a release of Kubernetes that has 0 known issues, but in the past we've had an issue open at this point that people start linking to if they run into something that's a known bug, but we're not going to be able to fix it in time for 1.8. If no such issue exists, I'm happy to go ahead and create one, unless I've missed what we were going to do to handle these in this time around.
At least from the perspective of shepherding the release notes, I don't think you've missed anything. It's something Radhika and I have been talking about, and I've been kind of AWOL for the last week, so please go ahead and do that,
Okay.
unless anybody else says something different.
Yeah, I actually kind of curious about that because I haven't actually heard, obviously I don't know everything that's going on, but I haven't heard of any known issues yet. I mean, which would be weird.
Jace, the API latency, that is one candidate which we can handle that way. Because
Yeah.
a revert might not be good because it works fine for most of the scenarios except for the large cluster scenario.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second, Tim's on the go, no go. Okay, but yes, thank you. All right, so speaking of go, no go, it was like Dim's handing me the baton in a race. Here we go. So I'm gonna actually create a new bullet point here and make this go, no go. All right, so we have various inputs into this decision-making process. Obviously, we have blocking tests, we have known issues. I mean, these are the things that are sort of part and parcel with the release. But what I'd like to get to is, and this issue with the API latency is a perfect example of what is the feeling about what sort of extra things could be release blocking in people's minds. And I'd love for people to opine as well on that particular API latency issue. So opinions welcome right now.
For that issue in particular, if we have identified that structured audit logging is the performance hit, there are a couple things to consider. One is that when we isolated it to the switch to that audit policy, which happened about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the default policy has improved since then. So we are already dropping additional high volume data. So we have improved the audit policy and continue to improve it. So we should continue to look at the latest density results to see where we're at. Also, if we have identified that auditing has a performance hit, which we knew, if you are running at scale where you care about that, it is trivial to change the policy or disable the policy. So that to me qualifies as a known issue for a narrow subset of users who are running 1,000 node clusters and honestly have probably already tuned things and disabled things and changed defaults to adjust to that scale.
Okay. I have, when I put on my ops manager hat about this one, I have this one gives me heartburn. because we're essentially the aspect of this that is troubling to me is that this is potentially torpedoing our SLOs that we have established. I don't know how important that is in terms of out of the box default config. Like, because your point is well taken.
Out of the box default, there is no audit policy. This gets down to individual deployments, right? So on GCE, there is an audit policy in place. If you are some user running your own cluster that you've set up, there's no default audit policy, and so you're not impacted by this. So if you spin up a new GCE cluster on 1.8, you get an audit policy. That's who is affected by this.
Okay, so what that says to me is that we need stakeholder input on that. And
agree.
So, Adam, I hate to throw you under the bus for this, but you happen to work at Google. Is there a way that you could potentially talk to people, spread the word, find out what the impact of this would be?
We're talking about the API latency issue. Sorry, we're trying to chase down a fix for the DNS thing.
Yeah, so essentially, it's going to it'll hit you. It'll hit GCE customers because the policy is turned on, the audit policy.
Yeah, okay.
And honestly, I think the right people are involved in that issue. So Tim Allclair from the security perspective, and Wojtek, and the scaling team. Like those are the right stakeholders. So I'd like to hear their perspective.
Yeah, I'll chase some down afterwards and see where it's heading.
Okay.
One other thing that may be worth pointing out, I know we believe we've iterated towards a specific PR to revert, and we're going to test with that, but I'm not intimately familiar with exactly which branch Sham is running the large-scale tests off of. I'm assuming he's using the GCE scale performance job.
Yes.
Maybe okay, and that's in the release master blocking tab. So I know he's maybe been manually pinning that to a commit, but I don't know if it's like in master, which over the weekend had many PRs merge into it.
No, he was bisecting and kicking off specific builds from specific commits.
Okay. All right, so we believe that if we identify the appropriate commit, we're going to test that by cherry picking it into 1.8 and then running the scale job in 1.8, or are we going to? See, I'm just worried that like there might be some confusion if we're looking.
The first step was to identify what the cause of the latency was. We believe we have done that.
Okay.
Now we're figuring out how we want to address that, and our options are, on the one hand, the option is do nothing and document a known issue. The other is tune the density scale tests the same way a high density customer would, which is turn off verbose things that slow your cluster down, like verbose audit logging. And so that would be changing the configuration of the performance scaling test. The third option, which is what I'm pursuing, is changing the audit policy to cut out some high volume events that would affect all clusters and see if that gets us back within our expected latencies so that the scalability test can continue running with the default config. That's ideal.
Yeah, I guess what I'm driving towards though is ultimately if I want to see a red box go green, I'm going to be looking at a box in the master branch, not a box in the release 1.8 branch, since none of this scalability stuff has been running against the release 1.8 branch. Which
yeah, I would expect to test him to test my change or any other change we wanted to make the same way he's been testing, doing the bisecting to isolate the problem.
Right, which I'm just sort of trying to drive back to. What exactly are we looking to for signal? What are the things that need to be green? And then who are the people that need to say, yes, A-OK? And it sounds like Jace was identifying all the stakeholders for this particular issue, but we can't look at a red box going green for this one.
We need to find out what will turn the box green and then commit it to master.
Okay, I'm pointing out that the contents of master are very different from the contents of the 1.8 release branch now. Maybe not in the areas that affect this performance bug, right? But over, like, many PRs got merged at the weekend.
Yeah, well over 100 flowed in.
It was 286 commits.
Right. So the same way we're running specific scale tests on specific commits, we can take my change to the audit policy, pick that onto the head of the 1.8 branch and test that and see if that passes this test. Then get that same change put into master.
Okay, cool.
All right. Okay, so we have a plan there. Jordan, how do you feel? Are you okay? You've sort of got the baton. Is that an okay thing for you on this? I mean, you and Shyam working on this, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're the two PRs are in progress now. They're good changes to make regardless,
Okay.
and I will work with him to see if we can get an early signal on that before it goes through the full 18-hour run.
Okay. So let's just, I guess, so the status on this being a true release blocker or not is going to come down to the feedback we get from Google, essentially. So Adam and et al., as soon as you have some updates there, can you post those in the SIG release channel so that we can sort of keep it posted? Thanks. I want to make absolutely sure we're not hamstringing customers with running production clusters if they want to upgrade. Okay, so I just looked at issues and now we're up to 7. So in the last half hour, we've had 2 new issues come up.
Those were the ones that I commented had the upgrade failures that I reopened.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you. All right, so my goal today is to go through all of these, and I'll work with everybody in the SIG release channel to do that, but we need to have as much current labeling signal as possible. So if these are not release blockers, then I would almost rather have them pulled out of the 1.8 milestone than put non-release blocker on it, because it is a release blocker if it's in the milestone right now by policy. So we'll see how that goes. So we can't really speak to tests and issues right now because that's all in flight. Is there anything else, sort of more intangible things about this that we're concerned about? The quality of the release notes, the level of review on the documentation that's out on the site. Anybody just feeling uncomfortable with it in the state it's in right now, or I mean, now is the time. You know, we have basically today and tomorrow to pivot some of these things, and I want to make sure that everybody's concerns have air. So, if there's something that you even have a concern about, just I think now is a good time to have those discussions. Okay, that's either a great sign or a horrible sign. We'll find out. So I'm hoping it's a great sign. So basically, it's down to this: there are no issues currently seen as likely blocking as it stands now, which means that I think that the likelihood of a release on Wednesday is probably 90%. That 10% is a lot. There's a lot that can happen in there, but let's hope that that's going to get erased over the next 2 days. Anything else in terms of go no go?
I don't know if this is go no go or not, but I saw there was a lot of discussion in SIG release this morning from Justin and some other folks around CNI. Did that get resolved? Because it was kind of unclear to me whether we finally decided that was done.
I can talk to that for like 10 seconds, which is we are running a particularly old version of CNI. There was a bug reported, which looks pretty serious, but it turns out at least we have the same bug on a cluster, on one of my clusters, and we are running an even older version of CNI. We're going to upgrade CNI, verify that fixes it. The remaining question, though, is the version of CNI we're running too old? Is there something important in there that we are missing, and that we need someone from like a CNI guru to speak to. We're running like, I think it's technically 051, but it's just a SHA, and I don't think it's even tagged. And people seem to think that we should have been running 060 maybe, and that people were pointing to that. So I don't know what is, there are 300 commits in that delta. And the question is, like, do any of those matter?
Do you see anything in this potentially release blocking, or is it just something that we need to keep track of for one?
I mean, there are 300 commits in there, right? So I don't know. Like, there was one in there that would have been a release blocker, right? Like, but that was in delta of the previous 2 versions.
Right. Okay.
So, hi, this is Dims. I added a couple of PRs issues in the announcement section. So this is kind of like known, I think. People have talked about it, but again, not sure if it's released or not.
Right. I was just unclear on whether or not something was changing to attempt to address this as part of release, because it sounded like it was known behavior in old clusters. If it is known behavior and we're sticking with the old known buggy behavior, great. If we're attempting to change something here to fix this, 300 sounds like a large number. So
yeah, I don't see how we can in practice change this and ship this month, for example, but I don't know what the consequence of those missing 300 commits is, and whether they're release notes or something like that, right?
This sounds like a great thing for the release note, the release 1.8 known issues, if you do find something that's particularly impacting. And I will post a link to this in the channel.
Yes, and can you stay in very close contact with Radhika on this, and also Jennifer, Justin, because they're the people who are currently doing the final edits on the notes. So
yeah, I mean, what we need someone from that knows CNI to speak up about what's in those 300 commits, right?
Who would be the right person on that? Is Tim or somebody else?
Sig Network, right?
Yeah. I have not been involved that much in Sig Network, so I don't actually know who the right person to ask about that.
I'd ping Casey of Sig Networking and on this, and he's in Germany, unfortunately, so I don't know if he'll be at work or not, but I'll give any updates from his perspective about this.
Okay. That's good. Great.
And if you can just add either me or Radhika, it doesn't matter. We communicate. We'll take the hot potato in whatever form it shows up. I mean, we're monitoring a repo too. It's no big deal, but it might help a little.
Great. Right. Any other things that we need to discuss before we adjourn?
So there is the first reversal proposed that Dims had there. It's actually a bug in Minikube, and we are disabling the feature in Kubernetes because of that. My open question there is, should we prevent a feature from being released in core Kubernetes if there's a bug in Minikube?
What version of Kubernetes added that field to the Swagger doc?
1.7?
1.7.0?
Yes, but Minikube I think had the problem from the beginning. They had a problem of having that. I don't know why I reported it to them, but yeah.
That seems like something we should not be responsible for supporting, but it would be great if we could fail gracefully.
There is a flag actually. Basically, that PR is is actually setting the default value for that flag to false. It is true right now. So there is a workaround for anybody that wants to use kubectl with Minikube.
So I guess we need to document in known issues. Is that, or this is so weird, these things like this. like what the best way to handle these are. Do we defer to them, or do we put something in? I don't know.
I mean, we can't make the Kube clients work against servers that aren't exhibiting canonical Kube behavior. Like that can't be the standard. If there's an easy thing to do that makes it fail nicer, we can consider it, but I don't think we can block Kube releases on the fact that some server out there has some behavior that isn't standard.
I agree.
I would support that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I will actually comment on that PR about this discussion here.
Okay, great. And you can refer them to minute 40 of the meeting for the discussion.
Okay, sure.
So I want to kind of be dumb for a second and go back to the go, no go thing. Just this is generally the sort of list I like to hear read over and over, so we're all clear. What are the things we're actively looking at? So we're going to be waiting to hear from stakeholders on API latency. Blocking tests. I heard you hand wave that, Chase, but what are we, of the dashboards that we have, are we paying attention to any of them? Are there tests that we're going to ignore as known flakes? Are there tests we're going to refuse to release until we see at least 3 passes in a row? I'd like us to get to that, as close to that level of clarity as possible.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
To me, I want to either, if they are like should not be blocking the release, I would like to move them out of the when they blocking dashboard, like as soon as possible. If we needed to be blocking, we need to chase them down and get it to be fixed like by today, or we kick the test out.
Yeah, so for the end-to-end tests, the tests like the Kubernetes tests are a good example of that, where we can just move the test out of the dashboard. I would like to vote for the upgrade tests, that for the particular set of tests that we know are read and have been read consistently, that we don't mark those as a no-go if they do go read. And we have buy-in from the SIGs that they're not release blocking.
So currently, all the 1.8 upgrade tests are in its own dashboard. Do we want to move some of them into the blocking dashboard?
Yeah, ideally. They will not be green is the main sort of issue there.
So what I would like to do is I would like a hit list issue. If somebody could create an issue about this, and we assign the SIGs that have the tests that we want to deprecate, we need to have some way of tracking this work and the decision making around this, because this is one of those things that from an audit perspective, we want to have a good trail of custody in this decision. So can somebody volunteer to create an issue on this?
So this would be an issue with each of the different job names, and whether or not we're going to call them blocking or not? Or
I kind of envision more of an umbrella type issue of here's the proposed deprecation of these tests from release blocking to not, and put in the SIGs as SIG labels that own that, so we're not tracking 7 different issues. But I don't know that that's the right way to do this or not, because then the discussion gets kind of squirrely.
Yes. So my take on this is when they release need to be matching like the master release dashboard, because we are like suddenly switching from the master blocking to release block to 1.8 blocking dashboard. For example, the kubeadmin job is not in the master blocking dashboard. There's no equivalent job for that, like the 172.1.8 kubeadmin one, and we're probably not looking at the 1.8, like, and suddenly we're looking at it, oh, now it becomes blocking. That's like not fair. Maybe I saw that I feel the better way is to like just keep the 1.8 blocking dashboard to be like equivalent of the master blocking?
There are many more tests in master blocking than there are in 1.8 right now. I guess it would be like the logical end of the 1.8 and the master blocking, I think is what you're asking for. Because kubeadm hasn't been in master, but is in 1.8. You don't want kubeadm around because we have no test history for it effectively. I guess I'm just sort of, and I'm also concerned with the contents of 1.8 and that release 1.8 upgrade thing I linked. At least the summary seems to imply almost every single test in there is failing, which is a little scary to me if we're saying that's the state of upgrade testing. Like if we look at release, the kubectl SKU for the master branch, it's a little nicer, but this is just red everywhere. Which was something I thought Eric had said in prior burndowns that he explicitly wasn't owning or not taking care of. And I'm trying to understand if 1.8 just looks bad because we don't have enough history with the latest and greatest fixes, and now that they've been cherry picked in, if I start going and clicking through on individual jobs, I'll see like more recent green runs for all of these things. Or what the story is. But I guess I do like the idea of if there are some upgrade jobs we want to be blocking, we probably ought to move those into a blocking tab. Because this is a large list of jobs and many of them are failing.
So I can speak to a lot of the noise comes down to these two sort of groups of tests, which are the network partition tests and the DNS entries test. Both of those are things that we thought were fixed and actually haven't been fixed. There definitely are some tests that are unique. For instance, I see some kubectl run RC bugs. I will try to track down why those are different from the 1.8 upgrade versus the actual master upgrade. But yeah, I as stated, I haven't been tracking the 1.8 release.
Yeah, for the kubectl jobs, CDC mentioned to me this morning, he sent a fix for the master branch actually to split out the serial kubectl job test and the non-serial ones. I probably need to do the same thing. Yeah, I need to branch the serial versus non-serial kubectl suites.
Okay.
That part.
So I guess I can volunteer to make like an umbrella issue. What would help me as a simple human to understand this is to start with just create a bulleted list of all the jobs that are in the release 1.8 blocking branch right now, and then start sort of commenting on specific ones like, hey, we think we're going to move these out, get some SIG attention on those, hey, we're going to get these out. And I want the closure of that issue to be an agreed upon bullet list of all the jobs we need to see green. We'll use that issue to have our discussion of which jobs we can explain away as humans, which jobs we're going to kick out with pull requests to the test grid config to make sure they're not on blocking dashboards anymore. And I can collaborate with Sen and Eric on that. Does that sound good? Does that sound like a lot of churn?
I think that sounds good. So the end product is basically people agree on this list. If it's not on this list and it's after the fact and it's breaking, then sorry, there was a window to have this discussion. I think that's fine. But the other thing is that essentially, since this issue will be consensus building around what that list should be, we have a very fine line of time and bike shedding potential here. So we're going to have to manage this list extremely carefully. And if you post in that issue that XYZ test should be deprecated because XYZ, make sure that those reasons that it's being deprecated are extremely well founded. For example, this test has never passed. That's a really good reason to pull this out.
Okay.
And if a test has been successively greened for 3 runs and we want to include it, that's a great reason to include it. But if it's just my feeling is this is a lousy test, that's probably not going to work because we're going to have to actually convince the community of this decision. So
I'm a big fan of transparent and data-driven decision making.
perfect. So just to recap, you're going to create the definitive test issue, the definitive blocking test issue.
Yes. I will get that up within the next half hour, and I will look to make sure that that issue, by end of day, we feel like we know what's in there and why.
Okay. Let's target by the time that we meet tomorrow to at least have some traction on that list. I'd love to have a review of the draft if that's at all possible.
Sure.
So the sort of dovetail on that is that we should probably email to all the various SIG leads and whatnot that issue exists and that we need feedback on it as soon as possible.
Okay, let me get that issue drafted.
Okay.
I will show you.
Great, thank you. I'll take care of the comms on that. Okay. So we kind of hit it, another hand wavy. How many successive tests do we consider to be a valid feedback for a test? I've always used 3, but that's pretty much arbitrary. Testing experts.
For regular ones, 3 is fine. But my concern is for upgrade tests, because it takes like 15 hours, like or 12 hours to finish one round. I'm not sure.
You actually literally don't have time
Yeah.
at this point.
Maybe the latest green means it's fine.
To be fair, a lot of the same tests are run in different configurations.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I might also add a caveat that if we get a red and it's non-deterministic, that's less likely for me to feel that it's an invalid test result. So if it's a soluble error that comes out, then that is a valid fail. So if a red green, I guess if the red is truly a problem that we can diagnose and identify, then that's a real red. But a red that is wow, this just flaked out because it timed out or something, then I'm more inclined to count that less against the test. So we can use human determinants on a flake. Okay. Anything else on this stuff? Aaron, this was you wanted to revisit this. So do you feel adequately satisfied that we've discussed this enough?
Okay, so to review, our go, no-go decision is ideally by the end of today, or certainly by the next meeting, we're going to have a decision on whether or not API latency is a blocker. We're going to have a list, an agreed upon list of all of the blocking tests, or at least plans on which tests we feel are going to be less critical to pass consecutive times in a row or slated to be kicked out of the blocking dashboard. We are going to populate that blocking issues bullet if there are any blocking issues, but we don't think, other than the API latency one, that there are any blocking issues right now. And we will make sure that there are no remaining concerns. The one that seemed to pop up in this meeting might be CNI, but we might be able to get away that as a known issue.
There was one blocking issue that was a validation change that has a pull in flight.
Oh, right. Okay. And we need to have a decision on what to do about Minikube and OpenAPI validation. So I would anticipate we're going to have some kind of just brief check-in in the channel about where we think we stand with all this or something. Does that sound like the checklist everybody else has in their head?
Yes, for me.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So rather than use your last 5 minutes for something frivolous, let's adjourn and go do some great work and get this hippo dancing. Sorry, I saw Fantasia over the weekend. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll stay in tune on the SIG channel.
Sounds good. Happy Monday.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.